What's up, everybody? Johannes Moser here. Welcome back to yet another podcast. And today I am extremely excited to be talking to one of my very, very good friends, the exceptional violinist Vadim Gluzman. Now, Vadim and I have been friends for many years. We've performed together on multiple occasions. We've played the double concerto by Ellen Forsova. We did the premiere of that. And we also play in a piano trio together with the wonderful pianist Yevgeny Subin. Maybe I can have him on the podcast as well someday. And our piano trio sounds a little something like this. And so here we are. Welcome to the podcast, Vadim Gluzman.
Thank you.
So it's funny to talk to you in this sort of half official manner because we've been friends for such a long time, but I feel like our friendship has sort of been one of episodes, and we come together and it's really intense, and then we both go our ways again. And when I think of you, like when we both say we're going home, I'm not quite sure where home really is for you, because obviously you come from Latvia, and then you have your home in Israel, and you live in Chicago. So where do you put your suitcase down and you say, okay, this is actually home?
Okay, so you're going to ask difficult questions. Okay. I
Nobody said this would be easy, Vadim.
I didn't know what to expect. To be honest, this is a question that I'm asking myself regularly. And I say I'm going home when I'm going to Israel. That's quite clear to me. I don't even need to think. I'm going home when I'm going to back in normal circumstances, when I'm coming back from a tour, when I'm going back to Chicago to be with my family. That's home. I remember for the first time after over 10 years or more, arriving in Riga. Both Angela and I landed, and we were in a taxi, and we called our parents just to say that we have landed. And I remember Angela saying, "So we just landed. We're going home." This is almost automatic. And then I was born in the Ukraine, and I spent many summers visiting my family in the Ukraine as a child. Until today, when I hear Ukrainian, there is some kind of a nostalgia. So I'm not going to give you an answer.
Yeah. No, I always find that fascinating. I had Dima Slobodenyuk on last week, and we talked about how heritage and especially language informs how we play music. And he said a lot of people are under the misconception that you have to play Russian music really Russian, because obviously composers like Tchaikovsky had a German influence, or Prokofiev also had many international influences. Certainly Stravinsky had influences from France and all that. So maybe also with sort of national schools of music, it's not necessarily so clear, this is typically of a certain area, so to speak, because influences just come off from all over.
Well, certainly not anymore. I think there were two contributing factors, major contributing factors to the dissolvement, if you will, of this idea of national school. That was internet and fall of the Iron Wall. In the internet a little later than fall of the Iron Wall, but the musical education truly became cosmopolitan. I see it today. Well, we're now 40 years later, but this is I don't think this idea exists anymore. When they write, for instance, about me, Russian violinist, this is truly laughable. Yes, Russian is my mother tongue, but I spent in Russia, living in Russia, in what today is Russian Federation, exactly 8.5 months of my 47 years. So I am all just a little bit more Russian than you.
Right. Barely.
Uh,
Barely.
Barely. So this is the idea of schools. It used to be, of course, very prominent. We had in the violin world, we had our Russians, we had our Franco-Belgian school, we had German school. They were pronounced, they were very defined, clear. They, of course, disagreed with each other, and each of them was right, and others were wrong, as it always is. Today, I don't need to tell you, you've studied with Russian teacher in Germany, and I'm sure that you have experienced, and not only sure, I know you have experienced the true Russian way of teaching. But I'm absolutely convinced that living in Germany for that many years, as Mr. Geringas has been living, he is not living in isolation. He is exposed, as we all, to incredible amount of information, styles, experiences, what not. And I don't think it is difficult to assume that Mr. Geringas circa 2010 is a different Mr. Geringas circa 1985. So even in cases like this, I'm sure the borders are becoming very vague, and then of course our generation is even more so, and then the generation of our students, there is really no definition whatsoever. I have in my class now a young lady who was born in California to Korean parents, and she's studying with an Israeli Soviet violin. I'm trying to define myself.
What a mess!
I know this is and she's the sweetest person, the most enthusiastic and upbeat you will ever find. Who is she going to be once she graduates from an American conservatory, studying with truly yours, coming from her background? I think it's wonderful.
Yeah,
I really do.
We did share as instruments those strong schools, because obviously as cellist we also had a very, very strong French school, and that meaning like very prominent French teachers that like even if you came like Heinrich Schiff, you came from Austria, you had sort of a French Navarra education, or then you had the stream of the Rostropovich and followers at the same time. And you know, when I think back, when one reads Harnoncourt, for example, that he sort of sees a defining moment around the time of the French Revolution, when the French conservatories were founded. And so the eighth note that you would learn in Paris would be exactly the same note that you would learn in Strasbourg and in Cologne. And I feel like what you mentioned with the fall of the Iron Curtain and the internet has sort of a similar effect of a sort of internationalization of styles. I wonder though if something gets lost, and if those I wouldn't say fights, but certainly those very strong camps of a Russian tradition or a French tradition or a German tradition, if actually they brought something to the table that then was interesting to compare and to discuss.
Most definitely, yes. And listening to kids coming from different conservatories in different countries, you do see some kind of a unification of styles. But yet, I don't think it's lost. The traits are there. They develop, they change within themselves, and they're being affected by the information from outside that is now available and instant. Basically, we get our information, if of course we're curious enough, within seconds.
Yeah.
But still, I would hear youngsters from Moscow, from the Moscow Conservatory, and I wouldn't need to read their names to know where they're coming from.
Right.
Uh, Maybe because I, to some degree, belong to that tradition, and it's something familiar to me. That's very possible. I would not lie or invent something and say that I would maybe be able to recognize a Paris Conservatory graduate. I don't think so. But I'm sure that traditions do not disappear. They change. They adapt. I wouldn't say it is. Some things I do miss some things, but I think it is more of a positive sign than negative.
Well, speaking of students, you are actually very popular in my studio because I quote you every other week with a specific thing. And I really hope the quote is from you. Otherwise, I've exposed myself as being my usual self full of shit. And that the quote is the vocalization of distance. And
That's me.
yeah, and I for me that was life changing, and also in the way how I now torture my students. It's also been life changing for them, and I would like to talk to you about that. First of all, where does this idea come from?
To be honest, I do not remember. Uh,
It might be even your idea.
it could be. I really don't want to take credit if it doesn't belong to me. I simply do not remember. I don't want to invent anything. Um, Singing has been always somehow very important to me. Not to sing myself, besides shower, but I think this is it's not that I think we all know it, that music came from singing and tapping. That's how it started. We, in a way, no matter what we do, even if we don't know it, we try to somehow copy or be like human voice in whatever instrument we're playing. And it is always very important to me. First of all, I always torture myself, and every one of my students has to listen to singers, and we talk about how direct is the connection all the time. So I'm happy this is useful. I do think it's important.
I agree with you with the human voice aspect, but I felt that the vocalization of distance idea, when it comes to intervals and when it comes to traversing the fingerboard, is something that was revolutionary for me as a string player, because so many of intervals can also be done over the strings, like a sixth, for example, is in the same position, and then that sort of distance is lost. For people that don't really know vocalization of distance, why didn't you explain that concept, and then I let you know if I totally misunderstood it, or if that actually is similar to what I'm passing on.
Well, I will try to make it as general as possible, in case there are people who listen to us or see us do not read music. There are distances between tones, and it takes a certain effort for our vocal cords to produce a distance. So let's say we were to sing what we call a second, the tones that are right next to each other. Do, re, something like this. It takes minimal effort. If I were to sing a seventh, this is the extreme distance on an octave scale. So do, si, I feel how my vocal cords are stretching or contracting. I'm not sure what's happening there, but there is effort, and there is a physical time that is passing between the notes, and time is very simply longer on the longer distances, and I think it's beautiful. And I would, my goal is to somehow reproduce it on our instruments. And since I know I might be disputed, but I do think that string instruments are the closest to human voice. it is actually not so difficult for us if we agree with this concept and follow it. I think it could be incredibly helpful in terms of expression, in terms of shape of phrasing. There are a number of things that really fall into that idea.
And when you think of that distance, and we think of the time that it takes between two notes, I personally try to distinguish, if it's a fast passage, that I subtract the time from the notes, or if it's cantabile, I add the time in the middle. Is that something that you've been thinking about a lot, like sort of not just that it takes time, but how to organize that time?
The give and take, of course. It has to do both with taking time between, or as you said, stealing a little bit from the previous note. It also has to do when it is directed. Well, now we're becoming technical, to physical shifting from one position. The fiddle is never far from one position to another. It also has to do with coordination with the bow. Do we shift before the bow change or after the bow change, and what kind of shift it is? Of course, every shift will take different time. Every kind of shift, but it is very important to make this decision when we're practicing. But we need to internalize them eventually, because if it becomes a calculative process on stage, we will become mathematicians in the worst sense of the word, which I hope we can avoid. When we make it play a shift or cover a certain interval on stage, it should come from within. It should not be calculated and measured right there and then.
So when you practice a shift, do you practice different possibilities for that shift, or are you rather clear, I'm going to shift and then articulate, or sort of slide a shift, or is there a distinction made before, or do you collect possibilities, so to speak?
I will always collect possibilities. I will play every way I can think of, if I am in doubt, of course. If I feel strongly that this is the way it has to be, then I will still doubt, but maybe a little bit less. Besides, I know this is a very, very nerdy thing to do, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the process, so I will spend time shifting this way and that way, and seeing what speaks to me. And of course, these opinions and decisions change. For example, I'm now working on Prokofiev's second concerto. I'm playing it next week. It's a piece that's been with me for decades now, literally decades. I've played it countless amount of times. I've recorded it, etc., etc. And I still doubt. I still change my mind. Actually, yesterday night, I was working on the second movement. All I did was to reconsider and there are many very long jumps in the second movement. It's one of the most glorious love stories he's ever written. It's unbelievable. And there are these enormous distances that we cover, and they not only can be, they are extraordinarily expressive. So I was again questioning myself: am I sure that that's what I want to do?
Well, with a piece that you've played for so many years, will you go as far as to change fingerings even? Because I feel like certain things are so ingrained that in a stressful situation we sort of resort, or there's a danger that we resort to our usual version. And of course that is probably the death of artistry, but it's also a fact that our brain, gravitates towards the known paths.
Of course, this is automatically what I personally do. Being as lazy as I am, I will play the way I'm used to do.
But is it laziness, or is it not how we function? No way.
I attribute it to laziness.
Okay.
In my case, certainly. I think it's it's the easy way out. I've played it that many times, and it seemingly worked okay. So why should I bother? When I could read another 100 pages of a book instead of re-examining what shifts I'm going to apply. Actually, for this, this is a question that, of course, I mean, it's always on my mind. The pandemic has been good in this respect. Like in my favorite quote from Faust of Goethe. I'm part of the power that eternally wills evil and eternally does good. There is no good without bad and bad without good. I've done quite a bit of work just because I had the time of going back to my bread and butter repertoire and looking at it with as fresh eyes as I could. Luckily, I basically collect music scores for no reason. I would just buy an edition that I don't have, not that I needed, but I would have it. And I would take just clean scores that I've never used and start from scratch. Often I came to conclusion that what I did was actually okay. Many times I found things that I never noticed before, and tried to bite my elbows, didn't reach them, but it has been very very rewarding in that respect. We will see how it plays out once we're back in the whatever normal is going to be. But I actually think that this could be a very interesting contribution to what I do. We'll see.
Yeah. So there was not necessarily the urge to learn a lot of new stuff, but you sort of revisit it most of the time?
Majority of what I did was revisiting. I did work on a concerto that was written for me just as pandemic broke by Erkki Sven too. Fantastic piece. I cannot wait to play it. It's so extraordinarily timely. The kind of music that it is. We do have it scheduled, so let's hope we're in shape to do it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
But besides that, I did not learn anything. I don't think I did, at least. No, I did learn. Sorry, I'm forgetting. I did learn a number of little miniatures by Gia Cancelli, which I absolutely fell in love. This was a discovery of the pandemic time again. It was in a pile of music that was again collected through the last few years, and there is a pile to look at. I'm sure you know exactly.
Absolutely.
And it grows with dangerous proportions. So once they started, my wife and I we would just read through a lot of music. Most of it went back to pile not to look at, but there were some that certainly must be learned and played. And among them there were these miniatures of Gia Cancelli, which he compiled for Gidon Kremer not too long before he passed away. Using music from his scores for theater and for movies. It is, I don't know how to explain it. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. This is an expression of someone who is not only not thinking to be trendy. I don't think this is someone who even knows what it means. And it is absolutely extraordinary. It's simple, it's pure, and it's just drop dead gorgeous. And it is very, very sad. And as he always said, my music is very sad and very slow. And most of the time it's really true. These pieces were absolute discovery. We would just play them for hours. They're
Uh-huh.
18 pieces, unbelievable. And
Amazing.
we incorporated them into recitals that we just were playing in this last month.
Yeah, it
And
seems
then
to me that you were actually one of the few that regularly did play concerts. No, I mean, you were also traversing the Atlantic a couple of times, where others didn't even traverse the street because they had to stay in confinement. So in a way, I feel you were extremely lucky in that sense. No.
very much so. Really, I just, but maybe by grace of higher powers or my own stubbornness, but or both. Uh, I just refuse to die before I do. So if there wasn't a chance, within reason, of course, and with all the precautions taken to make music, I will certainly take it. And I have been playing since August. I went for the first time I went from the States to Europe was in mid-August. And I have been going back and forth. There were some projects here in the States. Yeah, I need it. I need music. I'm being very egoistic.
And have they been mainly online concerts, or were they all with public? What experiences did you have?
Both. It has been a mix from uh, absolutely full house in Hungary at Leopold Hour Festival back in August, where their numbers were extremely light at the time. To purely recordings or live streams without audience at all. I would say 50-50, or yeah, basically half and half was both ways. We just played a couple of recitals in Texas and in Florida. In Texas, we had a live stream, and in Florida, it was in person.
Okay. It was funny because I really, at the beginning of the pandemic, you did a online concert for, I think it was Violin Channel, and it was so interesting to see because you traditionally, dare I say, have not been so attached to any kind of social media, so to speak. And I felt like with this online concert, it was as if you had done this kind of thing for years and years, and it seemed both you and Angela seemed so incredibly comfortable, and in just doing that. Do you think the pandemic has changed you in that way as well? That the online world has become more of sort of a normal for you?
Uh, I'm trying to find my own stubbornness right now. It has changed. My relation to the online world and to social media has changed, and I mean you know very well that I'm not someone terribly attached to it, and in fact I consider this, I still do, an extraordinary waste of time, at least for me personally. I'm not trying to suggest it to anybody else, but I'd rather have more time for my violin. But reality is reality. We don't take carriages anymore. We actually drive cars. And
Except for some of my relatives.
that's
But
very I remember that. Well, majority of us.
yes.
Um, this is our world, and if we want to be part of it, I think we should recognize it, at least to some degree. So after an enormous pressure from some of my friends, I was made to open an Instagram account. And
Really?
yes,
Vadim Gluzman, there you go. Nah, amazing.
and not only open it, but also with great pressure from these same friends to post there.
Okay.
Um, and I have had, as you know, Facebook before.
Tell
Yeah,
people your Instagram handle. Do you know it off the top of your heart? Is it just Vadim Gluzman or?
It's Vadim Gluzman, yes.
Okay, perfect. So everybody run to Instagram and
Oh, urgently, please
subscribe
drop everything immediately.
immediately.
Go and visit my page. But again, remembering Goethe, I think some things that have developed through this pandemic are actually very positive in terms of technology and its relation to music and to live music. I think when we have handle on this situation with the pandemic, the live streaming certainly is going to be a part of our life as a concert experience. I can't imagine that this will disappear, and I hope it doesn't. If we never thought anything wrong about televised concerts. In fact, we would always be a little bit more nervous, a little bit more excited, a little bit more prepared, etc., etc. Let's be honest.
No, absolutely.
So how is this different? If we both played with Berliner Philharmonica, they have been streaming their concerts for years and years. Yes, it at the time it was costly. It is much less so now. It still is I imagine it's a burden for many organizations. But as technology develops, I imagine the cost will be gradually easier and easier. And if our festival here in Chicago, and this is truly a pop and mom organization, is able to stream and to produce concerts in live stream and then on demand, I do think this is going to be something that we'll live with, and I do think this is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that the difference to televised concerts is exactly that thing that that now concerts are stored. So now suddenly there is a memory attached to most performances, whereas a radio performance or a TV broadcast, as exciting as that was, it also went away to a certain degree, and now things are to stay. And I think that also talking to members of the Berlin Phil, who of course are now veterans of the digital broadcast, they also said, well, we all felt like we are now doing this video recording for eternity, and it's there. So we really have to be at the top of our game, which of course they are. But I think that is something that took at least some getting used to for me, is that we're not only broadcasting, but we're storing it afterwards, and it's gonna be that moment that is then gonna be recorded, whereas usually our recorded moments were highly produced, like recordings. Speaking of recordings, your recording of Vasks is absolutely incredible, and Vasks obviously is among the people like Tur, or I would say Cancelli, where I feel that maybe also relates to where you come from. No, I mean or where you've spent many years of your life, and I wonder if that is sort of also a musical home when you come to well, dare I say, this kind of music, or this kind of region of composers, if that is something that speaks to you especially.
Very much so. Absolutely. This is the most natural attraction. This is a music, especially if we talk about Petris Vasks. I grew up, my childhood was spent in Riga, in Latvia. And of course, for those that don't know, Latvians are an extraordinary musical nation. Singing is one of the basically daily things that they cannot not sing. Latvia has produced enormous amount of fantastic choruses, and they still have really highest level of this tradition. And his music is deeply, deeply rooted in Latvian tradition. So it's in a way, when I play his music, I go back to my childhood. So of course, this is my comfort. This is where I go back home in a way. And I think it's very simple matter. I love his music. And you don't dictate love. either it's there or not. I've always did. I recorded first time his work, I think back in 20 years ago, and his music has always been somehow part of my life. And of course, this project was really labor of love. Everyone who participated, Hannu Lintu, who conducted the Finnish Radio Orchestra, he adores his music, and of course, my partners for the piano quartet. Vasks is actually a godfather to the cellist, and the cellist and violist Reinis Birznieks, whom you know, and Ilse Klaba, the violist. They actually premiered the quartet, so it's there is a really very, very direct connection. And Petris was present when I recorded the concerto.
Wow.
It's and of course he arrived in Helsinki unannounced and just came to the rehearsal, which was a breathtaking moment for everybody on stage, like Beethoven walked in.
Incredible.
But this is a composer that is very dear to me. Just 10 days ago, I was recording a program with my chamber orchestra. It's a chamber orchestra where I serve as a principal guest artist in Columbus, Ohio, the Pro Musica, and Vask's music was on the menu. The most amazing. I urge everyone, instead of going to my Instagram account, go on YouTube and listen to the performance of Vask's Musica Serena. There is a recording of Sinfonietta Riga with Normund Schnee conducting. It's the premiere performance in Riga. Vasks is in the audience. It's breathtaking performance. I absolutely adore it. And this is one of those moments when, as he says himself, he does sincerely believe that beauty will save the world. And when you talk to him, you don't even agree with, he is right.
It's fascinating to me that his tools are of a certain simplicity, yet the impact they have is so direct. Like it doesn't even bother to pass through your brain. It seems to go straight to the heart. At least that's the impression I always get with his music.
That's exactly what I feel with music of Cancelli, for example. And then we go, if we continue to Erkki Sven, this is completely different. Mm-hmm. He is a product of so many influences throughout his life. He was a classical musician, graduated the academy, and then went into the rock music. Yeah. He was one of the first Soviet rock stars. Mm-hmm. He toured with a rock band, and then he felt he needs to come back. Mm-hmm. And all of this, I think that it's an incredible compote of traditions, influences, desires in a way. They all are projected in his music. It's extraordinarily deep. Mm-hmm. It is quite complex. As time goes on, his writing becomes more and more complex. From what I've listened to, this is going to be the first time that I play his music. Mm-hmm. I've been always following, and when the idea came for another commission, I said this must now happen. Mm-hmm. Because he was already written 3 concertos. I can't wait any longer.
Well, how do you actually approach composers? Because I usually go to publishers or I know of people that know the composer, then I try to contact directly. But do you have a certain methods that you try to use?
It's case by case. If it's a composer that I would prefer, of course, a direct contact. That would be my absolute choice, and most of the time I would do it this way. But then if I don't know how to approach the person, it might be even through the orchestra that is kind enough to commission a new work, they will approach the publisher or the composer if they have a direct contact. There are many avenues. Most of the time, they will, of course, then ask for your recordings. They want to see if there is a link, and that's how it happened with Erki Sven. I sent him my recordings, and then he wrote to me saying that there is no doubt I already have the concerto. I just need to write it down.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Okay, I think we need to talk seriously now, because I was very amused, shall we say, and I hope I don't speak out of line here, that actually you're not very fond of cellists altogether, and
Oh
we
God.
don't want to point any fingers and we don't want to name any names, but speaking as sort of a as a representative of my craft, where is it that we collectively could sort of go in a slightly different direction?
Well, I don't know if this is an enlightenment. It truly is a very personal opinion. So I'm happy to share it. I felt, and to be perfectly frank, it is not only my problem with cellists. It's in a way a trend of the time. Somehow I've experienced it more listening to cellists, where the beauty of sound, the expressiveness of sound, the variety, depth, tension, etc., 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 has been shelved to a lower shelves, in preference of projection and playing as powerfully and as clearly as we possibly can. And I have to say this is, of course, very important. I'm not taking this away, but for me, other considerations are more dear, and I become sad when I don't find them in a concert that I attend or recording that I listen to. Somehow I've experienced it, as I said, more with cellists.
Yeah.
My main point is the relation to sound, and to what do we use it for? Why do we even have it? It became a little bit one-dimensional to my taste, and I feel nostalgic for listening to Daniil Shafran.
Right. I think we all do, to be quite honest. Yeah, I wonder if such a approach towards sound and towards philosophy on how to convey sound to the listener must be also formed by the protagonists that are prominent at the time, and I think also though that it may relate to the lack of overtones that we have as cellists, and in comparison to violin and piano, that maybe in a context of a larger hall or larger concert space, there might not be so much choice when you want to be heard. But that might be a complete misconception, and I think this is it's good that we're talking about it, because maybe when we rethink the quality of sound, then maybe the quality will come through, as opposed to just the sheer loudness of it, so to speak.
Well, I will then, ask you a question, because you are a cellist. I've attended a number of your performances, and yes, I'm biased. We're friends and colleagues, and I happen to say it mildly, like you're playing.
You're very kind, thank you.
I have never heard you play with orchestra just loudly for sake of playing loud. And yet you are always projective. I don't remember you not being heard behind or underneath, whatever, the orchestra. And with that, there is always color, there is always meaning to the sound, when the sound to the phrase, etc. Uh, is that a technical issue, or this is an expectation that is lacking in some of your colleagues?
I mean, I'm not the person to judge, so I don't know. What I can say is that from just the experience on how we put together a performance with orchestra, or shall we say against orchestra, 90% of the time is spent on balance, and it's. I mean, I guess it's really up to you then. Once the balance is established, that you do something with the room of sound that has been opening up for you. But yeah, we are so much at the mercy of conductors keeping the orchestra down that and it's always the same places in the concertos, right?
Of course.
Like there are some pieces that are just so transparent, sometimes surprisingly transparent, whereas others, just to name, for example, Dvorak, it's very easy for the flute or for the clarinet just to overpower the cello, and then suddenly one feels that we need to rival the sound. But I mean, the filling sound with meaning may not only be a cellistical issue, but it could be also a broader issue altogether. But I do see that a lot, and now in the pandemic, I also had the chance to listen more to other cellists, and yeah, it seems that there is a choice sometimes where people say, okay, I no matter what, I'm not going to make any compromise with filling the sound with great content, and for some people maybe projection is more interesting. But where to go with this? I mean, that's if young aspiring cellists are listening to this, I wonder what's the best advice to give in that situation, also from your perspective.
I had a session yesterday with an extremely talented young violinist, a beautiful musician, very sophisticated, and she kept. It was a lesson, and she kept asking, "How? So how do I do this? How do I do that?" I think some of it could be related to the fact that we're putting carriage in front of the horse. We're thinking immediately of how are we going to do instead of what are we doing. What are we saying? What does this music mean to you? What do you want to say with this music? Why do you play it? And then comes how. It's like driving aimlessly without knowing where you're going. You know how to steer a wheel and push the pedals, but you don't know where you're going. So you just drive. It's a little. I know this is a very simplistic analogy, but essentially this is very similar. I think we need to, when we look at the score or listen to a piece of music and imagine ourselves performing it, I think the first that should come to mind is, why do I want to perform this? What is the reason? There can be variety, of course, from simply liking a piece to wanting to show off my great fingered octaves or down bow staccato. It's all fine. If that's your goal, please go and show it off. Right. And I will sit there in awe, admiring it. But if I do feel that when you are playing Dvorak concerto, there are other considerations to it, and more than showing off octaves, as you certainly can, or showing your spiccato across the four strings. I think it is the basically question of priorities.
Well,
Uh,
speaking of priority, when you just mentioned your student, and as that is something that you've started recently, the teaching position at Peabody, is it right?
yeah.
Yeah. Um, is that something that you talk about? Like, what is your priority right now as a student, or is it really just okay? We're going to go from piece by piece and use you transfer your information. The reason I'm asking is this. I often feel that students have a really uncomfortable waking up moment where they come to their senses and they ask themselves, well, what have I been doing for the last 15 years? And I mean, I do think it is important to ask the questions of what do you actually want and why do you want to play the instrument? But I wonder if that is a question that needs to come to the student, him or herself, or if that is something that we can actually instigate and push for.
I think as teachers, I feel we must. I feel it is, in a way, it is our duty. I address every student that comes to me with perspective or idea of, for whatever reason they have to study with me. My first question is why, and why are you here? What is it that you want to do with this little wooden box and four strings over it? And where do you see yourself in, say, 10 years? What is your dream? Not goal, but dream. And from this, I very often, or most often, this is the first time that they hear this question or face it. And most of them give actually beautiful answers once they actually think about it. But I can see that this, each and every time, there is a bit of a shock. Maybe they're not used to it, or they haven't asked themselves these questions before. Difficult to say. I think it is important for me as a teacher who is going to spend with this person next X amount of years to know what are the aspirations and what does this person want, and why does he play the instrument, and why he wants to study with me and not with my distinguished colleagues. Why? It makes, I think it makes my job in a way more productive, because maybe I can help better or more efficient. That's but I do think it's very important on any level. Doesn't matter if they're going to study or they just sit in front of a mirror. I think these are the most poignant questions that we all should be asking ourselves.
And they certainly can be uncomfortable because,
Absolutely.
if you haven't asked those questions in years or never thought about them, then suddenly they come as quite a shock.
I always remember, I think I've shared this story with you before, of Leonard Bernstein being asked by a young pianist in Tanglewood to play for him, to listen to his playing. And Bernstein said that he has no time, but he will give an advice. Nevertheless, he asked him to go sit under that bench near by a tree and try to think if he can think of anything that he could do in life besides music. And if he can, he should go and do it. I actually know this person. He's a wonderful musician, but he is an investment banker, and a prominent one. And actually, I from little that I know of him, I think he's a very happy person. He still plays. He still has house concerts, beautiful Steinway, but he followed Bernstein's advice.
Interesting. So he came up with an answer.
He must have. He must have not asked himself the question before, and that was the turning point.
Right. Vadim, thank you so much for your time. It was really lovely to talk to you as
Great
always.
pleasure as always.
And we shall connect very soon again. I'm looking forward to
Absolutely.
that. Great. Thanks a million. Bye bye.
Bye.